As is usually the case, it's safe to say a great many people are traveling this Thanksgiving weekend. Now, if you haven't taken an airplane in a while, you might be interested to know some changes were introduced back in the spring designed to better protect customers who experience travel delays that are within an airline's control. Regulations were rolled out back in May, and they stipulated that airlines have to compensate you for things like flight and tarmac delays, cancellations, lost or damaged baggage. Well, all this sounds pretty good on paper. At least one advocacy group says there are problems, especially for people with certain medical conditions. Joining us tonight to fill us in, we are pleased to welcome passenger rights advocate Gabor Lukacs to the program. I want to thank you so much for coming in.
Good evening.
So these regulations, as I mentioned, were announced back in May, but some didn't really take effect until July. Others won't take effect until December.
That's right.
You've been fighting for a lot of these changes for a long time.
I've been fighting for those for more than 10 years now. The unfortunate reality is that what we have got is really a smoke and mirror type of solution and not real air passenger rights. Well, it looks wonderful on the paper, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at the details, you realize that these are rules that were written by the airlines, for the airlines, to protect the airlines from passengers.
So as of July, airlines have to pay customers who get bumped. They'll pay you up to $2,400 if it's something that the airline could control. They pay up to $2,100 for lost or damaged baggage. On the surface, that seems pretty generous. I can't think of the last time I traveled with $2,100 in my baggage.
So let's backtrace. When it comes to baggage, that law has been around since 2003.
Oh, that's not new.
The government is repackaging it as if they were giving you new rights, but actually they have not been perhaps properly enforcing it before, although they are enforcing it now, but they are re-gifting to us existing rights to a great extent, at least insofar as international travel is concerned. When you look at denied boarding compensation for when you are bumped, you need to look at the fine print, how it is defined that you are bumped. The government at the airline's behest defined the notion of bumping so narrowly that in the vast majority of the cases you will see no compensation at all.
It doesn't apply.
So just think of the couple from Edmonton. They were going to their honeymoon and they were bumped from their flights, but they got compensation only after massive media outcry. Right. And under the rules, strictly interpreted, they were not entitled to compensation, just that the media pressured the airline to pay up.
Interesting.
So the definition of denied boarding is such that you have to prove that the number of passengers at the boarding gate was more than the number of seats available on the aircraft. But as a passenger, do you know how many seats there are? Can you count how many people are there at the boarding gate? That's not realistic.
Good point. The rules also set up standards of treatment for tarmac delays. We've all been there. You get stuck on an airplane on the tarmac, it's not going anywhere. But your group is saying that the introduction of these standards for tarmac delays, there's a pretty big loophole in this.
The biggest problem is that we already had standards before that. Between 2008 and 2018, the Canadian standard had been that after 90 minutes, after an hour and a half of being stuck on the tarmac, the airline has to offer you the option to disembark.
Right.
This was more than doubled to 3 hours and 45 minutes.
You're talking almost 4 hours here now that can hold you on that plane.
And that is what the government calls an improvement. You have to bear in mind, Bruce, that the Senate of Canada actually recommended keeping the 90 minutes and amended the legislation to keep the tarmac delays to 90 minutes. But the government rejected that, and that's why we are here.
A lot of us might wind up with a, kind of a sore back, your legs get tired, but you're saying that this is particularly hard, even hazardous, to people with certain medical conditions.
That's right. For persons with disabilities, persons with spinal cord injury, people who are typically wheelchair-bound, they cannot just stand up and stretch like you and I would be able to do.
Right.
For them, this can create a significant medical hazard. They can develop pressure sores, and they can also get dehydrated. Something that most of us don't know, and even I learned through my involvement with persons with disabilities, is that if you have a spinal cord injury and you want to travel, you have to dehydrate yourself ahead of time because the bathrooms on board the aircraft are not really accessible. So you have to stop drinking water for maybe 24 hours in advance, so that you will not have to use the bathroom while you're on board or while you're traveling.
Incredible. You've actually launched a court challenge about this. Tell us about that.
We launched first a motion before the Federal Court of Appeal asking the court to hear a challenge to the new rules because of its disparate impact on persons with disabilities. That challenge was dismissed without any reasons, and this is the reason that now we are going to the Supreme Court of Canada and asking the High Court to look into the matter from two aspects. First, we have more than 80,000 people with spinal cord injury across Canada. What about their ability to travel?
Sure.
And second, how it is possible that when somebody raises a charter rights issue, because this relates to equality before under the law and Section 15 of the Charter.
That's right. You're fighting this under discrimination.
That's right.
Yeah.
So how is it possible that when someone raises a charter issue and discrimination issue, a high court would not provide any reasons? We find it highly problematic because it's one thing that maybe our arguments in the court's opinion are not good, but not saying anything, what the court thinks about those arguments, that's a problem.
Have any of the political parties mentioned any of this during the federal election campaign? Has this come up at all?
We have heard statements from the Green Party candidate actually right here in Halifax, who was critical of the Tarmac issues and also of how denied boarding is defined. The NDP has also taken a public stand on these issues. On our part, we have been encouraging through an online campaign on our airpassengerrights.ca website all voters to reach out to candidates in their respective ridings and ask them how they are proposing to fix the situation, because it's clear that the new rules are broken. That's
Right.
beyond doubt.
When will you find out if the Supreme Court will actually hear the case?
It is going to be several months. We have just filed the court papers, and typically it takes 3 to 4 months to hear back.
3 or 4 months. And we've got more changes taking effect in mid-December. What can we expect then? What's going to happen then?
Unfortunately, things are going to be even worse than in terms of flight delays and cancellations, because the rules are written in such a way that you would get compensation only if the delay or cancellation is within the airline's control and not due to maintenance issues.
Okay.
Now, as you have seen already in what the airlines tell passengers, all delays and cancellations are going to be due to safety
Beyond
from
their
now on.
control.
Or they will claim beyond their control. So they always make those claims. And as a passenger, your ability to disprove what the airline is saying is very, very slim.
Sure.
This is completely, incomparably worse than what they have in Europe. Europe has the gold standard, where maintenance issues are requiring airlines to pay compensation. You cannot rely in Europe on maintenance issues in order to avoid paying compensation. And also in Europe, it is the airline that has to prove that it was something completely outside of the ordinary, like a snowstorm, like a volcanic eruption, and only then the airline can avoid paying compensation. Otherwise, they're on the hook in Europe.
And
not in Canada.
all of this will take, in fact, just in time for Christmas, the big Christmas travels.
And in Canada, none of this is going to happen. So in Canada, people are going to get an empty shell, where in the vast majority of the cases, the airlines just will not pay.
Fascinating topic. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, Gabor.
Thank you very much for having me.
Really appreciate it. Gabor Lukacs is an airline passenger rights advocate, joining us tonight to talk about a court challenge to some new airline rules announced this year. Rules that could mean you could wind up sitting on a tarmac for up to 3 hours, 45 minutes, a long time, especially if you've got a disability. Stay with us. We'll be right back.